Now we are going to talk about the effect of protein energy malnutrition. Every chapter, especially for those macronutrients, we are going to talk about different disease that is related to this either overconsumption of the macronutrients. So this part is for the protein is like when we did not consume adequate amount of those protein, which we call protein energy malnutrition, or you call it protein calorie malnutrition. It's the most well spread form of malnutrition today. It affects adults, especially our children's. So when this like a protein energy malnutrition it occurs, its acute state is actually going to make those children's thin for height. But when this like protein energy malnutrition is like chronic, long it lasts for a long time. Actually, it's going to cause those like children become short for age, which you're gonna see that their height actually is shorter than the age they are supposed to be. So this process, this is like what we call growth failure, or we call like growth stunt. As you can see this figure, we have age 2, age 4.5, age 5.5. And then, you can see like from the height, the 2 years old and 4.5 years old boys, they are actually in a normal height. But for the, 5.5 years old, this like, kids, he had the, growth down because his height actually did not increase. So that's why we know this growth down actually is the evidence of chronic mild protein energy malnutrition. This is another like big figure showing you 2 10 years old boys, and you can see like on the right side, this boy, he had like growth stunt. This is the evidence for chronic protein calorie malnutrition. Among those protein calorie malnutrition, I want you to know two disease. One is called Kwashiorkor, the other one is called marasmus, and I would like you to know what are those symptoms among this Kwashiorkor and marasmus, and that's how you're gonna have those like questions in the exam. First one is called Kwashiorkor. Is a disease that the first child gets when the new child comes. So what does that mean? So usually they have Kwashiorkor happens in those like a third world country. They usually do not have adequate amount of food, which is mainly we talk about protein. So when the first baby came, usually they will get the breastfeeding from the mom. So that's why from the breastfeeding, as long as mom is getting adequate amount of those protein, fats, carbohydrate, then the first kids also get those amount. However, when the second new child comes, then who is going to get the breast milk? So usually the second kids had the priority to get the breast milk. So that's why the second child starts to have those baby food. However, those baby food contains high amount of those like starches, low quality protein, because in those like a third world country, they are eating kind of like this kind of like a food that mainly is all like starches inside. So they have a low high quality protein. Don't worry about what is high quality protein. I will explain to you what is high quality protein in this part 2. So that's why the first baby, they get those inadequate protein intake, and their calories they can get adequate amount from those like groups that they consume, because they usually are the starches. So the starches they give you supports adequate amount of those carbohydrate and energy, but they did not get those adequate amount of protein. That's why they have those diseases like symptoms that you're going to see. So usually it can happen in like older infants, because the first baby, because it's the second baby comes, and the first baby had this disease. So you can see that happens usually in young children between 1 to 3 years old. They have poor overall health because they have like higher needs for the protein and energy needs, and because they did not get adequate amount of protein. So that's why they are not going to have an adequate amount of defense, which is those antibodies that protect them from those like infections. So they also have like those parasites occurs in the third world country. That's why they have those infection problems. So what are those symptoms? They may have like some weight loss, but they're like their body weight actually is going to maintain, probably because they're getting adequate amount of calories and carbohydrate from those starchy food they consume. So they have some fat retained, which means they are not going to be very skinny, because they have those like extra amount of calories from the carbohydrate, so they can store some fat. They may have some muscle wasting. If you remember the function of the protein from the beginning, is that when you did not consume adequate amount of carbohydrate, then you are going to use the protein to make glucose. But because this time they have those adequate amount of carbohydrate from the food they consume, so that's why they only have some muscle wasting. And their face is like if you look at them, they have apathy and lessness or withdrawal those symptoms because they lack of those protein for brain development, and they have lack those energy for interactions. They have those failure to grow because protein is not available to build those body tissues. You're going to have those minor diseases sometimes can be fatal because they don't have those antibodies that produce from the proteins, which they have a deficiency of the protein consumption. That's why the immune system is going to compromise. They may have some kind of infection that causes them to die from that infections. And they have hair color change because they're very easily to be pulled out because our hair are actually made from the protein. So that's why they are going to see those color changes and texture changes in those hair. They're also going to have those fatty livers. Why they have fatty livers, I'll explain to you in later slides. They're going to have those swollen abdominal and legs. Sometimes you can see edema or fluid imbalance. The reason for that is because if you remember the function of protein, one of the functions for protein is going to maintain the fluid balance. Protein is going to like magnet to draw those fluid back from the artery. But right now, when they have a protein deficiency, they are not adequate of those protein in the artery. They are not going to draw those fluid back from the artery. That's why those fluids are going to stay in those extracellular spaces. That's why they have those swollen abdominal or legs. And sometimes because they have those parasites in their stomach, that's why you're going to see those swollen abdominals as well. All right. So this is how a Kwashiorkor kids look like. So you can see they have a swollen abdominal, but after treated, you can see this kids was really happy. The abdominal is not as swollen as this one, and you can see this apathy withdrawal faces, and you can see on the left hand side on this on the right hand side this kid as well. After treatment, you can see he from his legs he actually enhanced. He has those edemas, but after treatment you can see they don't have this kind of edemas anymore. And then you can see typical Kwashiorkor, you have a marked swollen. Look at this abdominal and legs is very obvious, and sparse and light color hair. If you compare to his mom, you can see the color is different. Large abdominal and look misery, okay, because lack of protein for brain interactions. And then this figure actually show you more clearly about the hair color changes, and we call depigmentation because supposedly they should have an adequate amount of protein to make those pigments, but because right now not adequate amount of protein, that's why you can see depigmentations. Okay, they're going to have those fatty liver and edemas. So why they have those hairs very easily to pull out? Why they have those fatty liver in those Kwashiorkor kids? Remember, we need something to transport the fat out from the liver, and that protein is called lipoproteins. So since we call it lipoprotein, so it needs to have those protein to make those lipoprotein. But right now, those Kwashiorkor kids, they do not get adequate amount of protein. How are they going to make lipoprotein to transport the fat out from the liver? So that's why those fat, whenever they consume extra amount of carbohydrates, they're going to store as a fat and store in the liver without transporting out to other cells. That's why you're going to see those Kwashiorkor kids, they have fatty liver. Okay, you can also see the edemas because fluids, is going to need to be withdrawn back to the artery, but without the protein, they are not going to, maintain the fluid balance. All right, of course, we can see those adults, they have those adult Kwashiorkor as well. For example, like people who have alcoholism, or cancer patients, or they're going through those treatments. Sometimes for them, they cannot absorb adequate amount of the protein or consume adequate amount of protein. That's why they have those adult Kwashiorkor. So for the this adults, you can see V figure. It's very obvious for him that his leg has those edema, but after treatment, you can see the D figure, it's going to be, back to normal. And you can see on the A figure, the face, expression is withdraw those symptoms. But, after treatment, you can see how the changes on his face expression. Okay, so what is the treatment for the kwashiorkor? Again, they did not get adequate amount of the proteins. So you're gonna give them adequate amount of protein. Of course, when you give them adequate amount of protein, you also need to make sure you give them adequate amount of calorie intake, because without adequate amount of calories, body is going to break down the protein to be used as energy or carbohydrate. So what is the meaning? To give them those like adequate amount of protein. So you need to make sure you also give them adequate amount of carbohydrate. When you increase those calories consumption, you also need to give them adequate amount of macronutrient, which are vitamins and mineral, because they are what? They are keys. Without the keys, you cannot start the engine. So that's why you need to have those, all adequate amounts in protein, calories, vitamins, and minerals. You're also going to treat their parasite infection. If you successfully save those kids in time, you're not going to see any any short for the age, short height for age. But sometimes it's very it's too late for us to treat them, because sometimes they really have chronic protein calorie malnutrition. So that's why you can still see them to have a growth stunts. And also we have to remember one thing: we don't want to feed them too quickly, because it's called reverse feeding, because too much of them in the body actually is not going to be absorbed. When you give them too much of those nutrients, they are not going to absorb in the body. So that's why you're going to gradually increase the amount that you're giving them. So the second disease for the protein calories malnutrition is called marasmus. And then how did you remember this is a muscle wasting away? You can see how skinny this kid was. So you can see his rib. So especially his arm is like a matchstick, that kind of skinny arms, because they did not have adequate amount of protein. Again, not adequate amount of carbohydrate intake. That's why protein is going to be used to produce the calories and glucose. That's why everything is wasting away. That's why at the end they become this kind of skinny kid. So they can also happen in infancy, less than 2 years old. Okay, sometimes one of those reasons why we have this kind of marasmus kids, because they have severe energy deprivation or impaired absorption. So you can see sometimes if you didn't treat their impaired absorption problem, they are not going to absorb those nutrients. That's why they may have those severe energy deprivation. Their diet is totally insufficient. They are not getting enough of those protein or calorie intake. So that's why no breastfeeding or little breastfeeding, or sometimes the infant formula are over diluted, and then the dilutions actually make those watery become osmolarity is not the same as our body. So that's why it cause those dysentery, which is severe diarrhea, which means when they consume the food, they are going to diarrhea out those food. That's why they didn't absorb any food. That's why they still didn't get adequate amount of those nutrients. And sometimes in those third world country, they use those unsanitary water to prepare their breast the infant formula. That's why causing them to have diarrhea. So from here you have to learn one thing. You can go through this YouTube website to look at the video to see why I say don't dilute the formula, because for those infant formula, they are designed with the same osmolarity to the infant's bodies. So when you dilute it, the osmolarity is different. When the osmolarity is different, that affects our heart beating, affect muscle contractions. So that's why causing those kids to have diarrhea. That's why, even though I know in those some people, they try to stretch their money because they don't have a lot of money to buy those infant formulas. That's why they dilute it. But again, you have to remember, we never dilute our infant formula because osmolarity is different. So what are those marasmus symptoms? First one, they have little body fat store. Again, because muscle is used, which are those protein are used to make glucose, to make energy. That's why they don't have actually extra amount of those protein to store in the body, because they have severe energy deprivations. They have severe muscle wasting, severe weight reductions. They look old and sick because think about their skin cannot be covered with those stored fat. Their skin is dry and thin, easily to a wrinkle. Hair is sparse and thin. Their blood protein relative normal because everything is kind of like low. That's why when you measure their like blood parameters, they are normal. So you're not going to see edema. You're not going to see any fatty liver in marasmus kids. So sometimes you can see their like growth retardation is permanent, okay, and they have like slow brain development because everything is deprivated, and sometimes it's permanent. And then you're gonna see decreased metabolism. This is like a one of protection mechanism whenever we have like energy deprivations. Of course, your body try to slow down your metabolism rate. That's how it can save those energy. So that's why they have decreased metabolism, and at the end they lost their like muscle and organ tissue because at the end they still need to use those like protein to make the energy. If you think about the priority between brain and tissues or muscle tissue, they're going to choose the brain to make sure it has normal function. That's why that's why at the end they're going to have loss of those like muscle and organ tissues. Decrease body heat because they don't have any fat stored in their body. That's why those kids, they're going to like feel cold most of the time. That's why they have like produce a thin layers of like thin layer of hairs on their skin, which we call lanugo. You are going to see lanugos in marasmus or people who are eating disorder, which is anorexia nervosa. Third one is infants, newborns, because their body have those lanugo to protect them from those like heat released out from the body to maintain the heat in the body. That's why for those marasmus, you're going to see they have lanugos as well. Their face also is like apathy and may sometimes anxious. Okay, their immune system is compromised as well. So this is how a marasmus kids look at how skinny this kid was, but after treatment this kid back to like normal weight. And adults, you have also marasmus. So what's happened again, sometimes it's caused from those like deprivated energy. So what are those patients who have those deprivated severe energy deficiency? Usually like HIV/AIDS patients, at the end they cannot consume any food. That's why they also have those adults marasmus. So you can see on the B figure, this adults actually have fat and muscle wasting, and after treatment there's like go back to like better higher body weight. You're not going to see edema or fatty liver in those like adults marasmus. Hair color is not seen either. All right, so let's see which one is marasmus, which one is Kawashiorkor. So you can see, let's look at leg. Okay, yes. So you have edema, but on the right hand, kid, he did not have edema. So that's why the first one, so face is like also very look miserable, and the hair color also changed. So we know on the left side is Kawashiorkor and the right side is marasmus. So what are those symptoms that that we notice? Are they what you notice as well? Okay. So what is treatment for marasmus? You're gonna give them large intake protein and energy, which means everything. You also give an adequate amount of those like vitamins and mineral as well. So permanent retardation is very common among those marasmus kids. All right. So here, this is like a deficient of the protein consumption. How about when we consume too much of those protein? What happens? Again, I have to say this one. The question mark means like there are some kind of like suspicious like result that we may see from those high protein consumption. However, so far we cannot really have kind of find a direct correlation between the high protein intake with those like diseases, because we do have like a really good function of our kidney and liver. So sometimes usually when you consume high protein intake, really it doesn't really have a significant effect right away. You're gonna see it's a long chronic that when you consume those high protein diets, then you have a chronic effect on your protein and livers. So that's why you're not going to see that effect right away. But every time when you consume like high protein intake, that actually is kind of have like strike on your liver or kidney. At the end, you can see those effects. But I have to show you this one. When you have a liver or kidney dysfunctions, for sure you're gonna have a low protein intake, because your function, our ammonia relies on liver and kidney to get rid out from our bodies. So what are those effects? Generally, when people consume high protein diets, they usually have a lower consumption of dietary fiber and phytochemicals, because high protein diets, they are actually coming from the meat that we consume. So that's why, of course, meat don't have like a high amount of dietary fibers and phytochemicals, or those vitamins and minerals usually have high protein inside. So that's why those people are going to have a lower consumption of those dietary fibers, phytochemicals, vitamins and minerals. And usually those protein animal products, they are meat, okay, they usually high in saturated fat and cholesterol. Of course, you can trim those visible fat to get rid of those saturated fat, but sometimes you cannot get rid of all of them, because inside in those meats they still have those saturated fat and cholesterol only comes from animal products. They also may increase the risk of colon cancer, because especially red meat, the colon in those when it comes to those red meat, they have those special nitrogen inside, and those bad bacteria like to use those nitrogen to produce those harmful ingredients toxins in the colon. That's why damage the colon may cause us to have those colon cancer. When we consume those high protein inside to our body, actually those acid solution, in order to release those alkaline solution to balance the acid solution from the protein, we have to release those calcium out from the body to neutralize it. That's why it may increase the calcium loss in the urine. And the other one is endanger our kidney function, because after we consume those high protein, those nitrogen have to get rid of our body. We have to go to deaminations, and deamination produce the urea. When the urea is produced from the liver, they have to send to the kidney to excrete out from our body. So that's why it may endanger our kidney function, because the kidney has to release those urea out from the urine. But so far those question marks, sometimes even you have 10% of kidney function, the kidney is still going to work hard to get rid of those urea out from our body. So that's why kidney is really working hard organ to get rid of those nitrogen out from our bodies. All right, so there are some athletes, they really need to consume a higher amount of protein consumption. So that's why here for endurance and strength training athletes, they need to have a higher amount of protein consumption. The experts suggest 0.17 grams per kilogram body weight. However, the Food and Nutrition Board, they didn't recommend that, because they still think too much of protein is actually, we're not going to use them that much unless you are doing really more high intensity exercise. Then you need that much, but we don't really need that much. Okay, and for those, remember this one, for those mental stress, which for example you are playing those video games, or recreational weekend sports, or physical labor, you don't require higher amount of protein intake, just regular based on the 0.8 grams or kilogram body weight to calculate the protein you need. That's enough, because for mental stress, you actually use your brain. You need more carbohydrate. You don't need that much of protein. For the physical labors, because they used to this kind of training. That's why not training, I should say this way. For example, you are building the house. Your body are used to this kind of labor work. Then when you consume that the amount of protein daily, the body is going to use the amount of protein that you consume to match what you lost. That's why they don't really require extra amount of the protein intake. But for sure, for endurance athletes, strength athletes, because they are training themselves, that's why they do require higher amount of protein consumptions. So here, this is a typical amount that Americans consume. Male is 100 grams per day. For a female, it's 65 grams per day. And actually, it already exceeds what we need per day right now. Because think about your body weight right now. If you are 220 pounds divided by 2.2, then you need 100 grams of protein. But did you have that high of body weight? No, you don't. So that's why we actually consume more than what we need. So that's why we don't actually recommend people to consume extra amount of protein consumption. And remember, protein cannot be stored in our body. So when you consume extra amount of protein, we just excrete them out as a urine, as a urea, or we store them as a fat. That's why we said, what we consume right now is adequate. All right, we are going to talk about another topic, which is called vegetarian diet. And a vegetarian diet right now is very, popular. It is defined as a one that does not include meat, including fowls or seafood or product containing those, foods. Of course, among those vegetarian diet, there are different kinds. Okay, but before we talk about different kinds of vegetarian diets, we want to know about what is a position paper from the Academic of Nutrition and Dietetics. It said, okay, actually it's appropriate in a plant vegetarian diet. Actually, they include, as long as they are healthy, nutritional adequate, and they may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain disease. So again, see this word, well planted vegetarian diet. You have to plant your diet in order to get those adequate amount of nutrient, because we already knew that in the vegetarian diet, there are some kind of like a nutrient that is going to miss. That's why you have to plan your diet in order not to miss those, nutrients. So let's talk about different vegetarian diet first. First one is lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. So when you see this one, lacto-ovo, lacto mean lactose, which means from the milk. Oval, think about the structure of the eggs. So that's why it's kind of like an oval shape. So that's why for this kind of like a oval, lacto-ovo vegetarian, people, they don't eat meat or fish, but they eat eggs and dairy. For those lacto vegetarians, they don't eat meat, fish, eggs, but they drink, or use those dairy products. For vegan, or we call total vegetarian, they avoid all of animal food, including meat, fish, eggs, and dairy products. Semi-vegetarians, it's called, they don't consume red meat, but they will eat those like seafood, those egg or dairy products. Okay, and for those vegetarian diets, because they are not going to eat those meat, fish. If they are like a vegans, they are going to miss, they're going to consume less amount of protein, because, for those vegans, they get their like protein mainly from those, whole grains, legumes, or like nuts. And those nuts, sometimes, excuse me, they are not high quality protein. So that's why they need higher amount of lower quality protein to compromise those high quality proteins. So that's why for a regular person, we need 45 grams of high quality proteins. But for those, vegans, they need 65 grams of lower quality protein in order to compromise those, protein needs. There's other diets. There are other diets. They sometimes call themselves of like vegetarian diet. But if you look at what they consume, you may see they are actually not a vegetarian diet. So the first one is called macrobiotic diet. What do they consume? They mainly consume grains, legumes, and vegetables. Fruits, nuts, and seeds are used to a lower extent. Some fishes, some people they eat fishes, so they are not truly vegetarian diet. Another is called raw food diet. Any kind of diet is fine, I think, but I think this one is like worst, diet, and I don't know whether you like it or not. But for me, I don't think this is good, because sometimes we do really need to cook our food, because cooking actually is going to denature the protein, and that's when you denature the protein, enzyme to work on those like proteins, so it can be easily to be digested and easily to be absorbed. So that's why I really don't like promote this diet. Okay, so what is raw food diets? They mainly consume both uncooked and unprocessed foods, so like fruit, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and sprout grains and beans. So like those unpasteurized dairy products and raw meat and raw fish may be used. So that's like this is not a vegetarian diet. This is one consider a vegetarian diet. It's called fruitarian diet. If you see this word fruitarian, so it's more mainly they consume fruits, nuts, and seeds. So like some vegetables, they are also considered as like a fruit as well. Like avocados and tomatoes, they are also included. So even though we know avocado is not fruit because it's in the fat, because have those what is that? It's monounsaturated fatty acid, so that's why it is like fat. But we still consider it's in this part for them. They consider it as a vegetables. Okay, so other vegetables, grains, beans, they can be used, but animal products are excluded. So this is like a one diet that we consider as like a vegetarian diet. So why people like to become a vegetarian? Because some people do it for the health considerations. Usually, consuming those veggies, fruits, and nuts, they have those healthy fats. They don't have that much of saturated fat. That's why it can lower the risk for the cardiovascular disease. Some people concerned for the environment because when you raise those animals, they produce higher amount of carbon dioxide, and which carbon dioxide may destroy our ozone. That's why we don't want that. They don't want that animal welfare because we don't want to kill them. Economic reasons and ethic consideration like Buddhism, they don't eat any animal products, or hunger issue or religion beliefs. So what are those considerations that we have to notice about for those vegetarian? First one, let's look at this one right here. One is calcium. Calcium are mainly coming from the dairy products, but for the vegan, they don't eat any dairy products. So that's why they are not going to get adequate amount of calcium. But again, we now have more fortified food available in the supermarket. So you can still get those fortified calcium from the soy milk, orange juice, almond milk, rice milk. So this problem can be solved. Iron, iron, because we have two kinds of iron. One is called heme iron, Heme iron. The other one is called non-heme iron, Nonheme iron. In the meats, those are heme irons and non-heme irons. In the vegetables and fruit, only non-heme irons. And heme iron has a better absorption rate compared to non-heme irons. So that's why when people they are eating those vegan diets, they are actually all getting those non-heme irons without heme irons, and absorption rate is really low. That's why for those people, they are more likely to have those iron deficiency anemia. However, again, we fortified the irons in a diet. So for those vegans, they are going to look for those higher amount of iron in their body in order to compromise the iron non-heme irons consumption. Zinc. Usually we find zinc in those seafoods, animal products, but for those vegetarians, they are not going to eat meat. Vegans, they don't eat meat and seafood. That's why they are going to get those lower amount of zinc. Again, we also fortify the zinc in the diet, so that's why they're going to look for those zinc. And for the B12, it's like the cholesterol. It's only coming from the animal source. So when those vegans, they're going to eat any animal source, they're going to have vitamin B12 deficiency. However, B12 stored in our liver for about 5 to 10 years. So for people to discover they have vitamin B12 deficiency, it usually take years to find it out. So that's why B12 is important micronutrient to be noticed for those vegetarians. Vitamin D also good in those animal source. However, we can synthesize the vitamin D from the sunshine. As long as we stay in the sunshine for 15 to 20 minutes, we can get 90% of vitamin D per day. So that's why we don't need to worry about the vitamin D anymore. Long-chain fatty acid. Think about long-chain fatty acid that we learned from the fats. Mainly they are coming from the seafood, especially ocean deep seafood. So for those vegetarians, they are not going to get those long-chain fatty acid. That's one problem. However, we can get those a plant source of long-chain N3 fatty acid, which are those walnuts and those flaxseed. So that's why we still can solve those problems. Luckily, just because we now have more new product available, including those fortified food, that's why we can solve those problems. But again, for those vegetarians, they have to keep in mind what are those nutrient they may lack in their diet. So that's why they have to plan their diet well. Even though even when they're younger age, they have to plan their diet with those consideration as well. Because without considering those deficient nutrient in their diet, they're going to have those deficiency from those nutrients. The benefits of become vegetarian, they lower our blood cholesterol level and lower risk our heart disease, and because they are consuming more fruits and vegetables, they have a higher amount of potassium inside. So that's why it's going to lower our blood pressure level and lower the risk of type 2 hypertension. And then since they are eating those vegetarians, they may have like less amount of those carbohydrate intake. They may lower risk of type 2 diabetes and lower BMI, which body mass index, which is lower body weight, and then overall may lower our cancer rates. And that's how they also tend to lower our tryptophan cholesterol. And because their diets are high in those dietary fiber, which is going to promote our GI health, potassium, which is lower our blood pressure level, folate, which can prevent the nutritive defects for those pregnant women. So those are the benefits why people are using the vegetarian diet. Okay, not only that the concern for those nutrients, I also have those other concerns, like for example, low nutrient density. Again, high nutrient density means they have those essential amino acid. That's why we said they are high nutrient density. And no, sorry, let me say that again. Low nutrient density. Remember the definition for the nutrient density, which means the protein, we compare their proteins, vitamins, and minerals in the same amount of calories. So vegetarians, they do have in those fruits, nuts and seeds, legumes, and vegetables, they do have lower protein content. That's why they are low nutrient density, even though they do have a protein inside. But again, it's not high quality. Okay, that's why we do complementary amino acids, which means we have mutual supplementation or mutual complementation. We combine different lacking protein together. We can complement each other, so it's called complementary amino acids. Okay, so and they also have, in those vegetarian diets, they have a higher fiber inside, so that's why they may have poor nutrient absorption. Remember, in the carbohydrate sections, I talk about when we consume more high fiber diets, then it's going to inherent the mineral absorption. So that's why they have a poor nutrient absorptions. And they have a lower iron intake because heme irons in meat and in animal products. And then inadequate vitamin D, vitamin B12, calcium, zinc, and long-chain fatty acids, and 3 fatty acid intake. But I already told you how can we prevent those inadequate intake of those nutrients. And children are at higher risk for nutritional deficiency. Think about first one, because their stomach is actually tiny. But when they are consuming more of those fruit and vegetables, they have more fiber consumption inside, and then going to make them become full easily. That's why they are not going to consume more energy, food. So that's why they are higher risk for those nutritional deficiency. That's why you have to plan well for those children who want to become vegetarians. All right. How do we know we are getting adequate amount of consumption? Actually, we have one equation which is called nitrogen balance to determine whether we are getting enough of protein needs. So let's look at the protein equivalent. So protein equivalent means the protein intake equal to the protein excretion. When they are in the same equal, that means we are in the protein equivalent. What kind of people they have protein equivalent? Healthy adults, when they meet their nutrient needs, calorie needs, and our body weight is not changing, that means we are actually getting have the protein equivalent. For some people, they are going to have a positive nitrogen balance. For those people who are growing kids, pregnant women, recovering stage after illness, and athlete training, because they have to build more muscle in their body, they need those extra protein. That's why the body is trying to retain those protein intake and lower the protein excretion. That's why they are in the positive nitrogen balance. For some people, they are going to be in those negative protein balance, which means their protein excretions, it's higher than protein intake. What are those people? When people in the fasting status, because the body is not getting enough of protein consumption, then the body is going to use protein to make those glucose and energy. That's why they are protein negative nitrogen balance. Or people have fever, burns, infections. The body tries to use those protein to fight for those antigens. That's why they're going to break down the protein to mainly do that job. That's why they are in the negative nitrogen balance. All right, so how do we determine this protein is a high quality or low quality? So we use three measurements to measure this like protein quality. First one, this protein has all of the essential amino acids. Second one, it has to be easy to be digested. When this protein, in this food is not easily to be digested, we are not going to absorb it. Then we are not going to absorb those amino acids. Then it's not, even though it has high amount of protein inside, but it's not going to be absorbed. Then it's still not a high quality protein. Third one, after we absorb this protein, it's able to support our growth. Of course, you have to see the body weight gain and see the height increase. Then after you absorb it, you are able to utilize those. If you don't have these three components inside, you cannot say this protein is a high quality protein. So, of course, when you want to compare this protein, whether it's a high quality protein, you need to have a reference protein, which is the gold protein. Usually that's eggs. As you can see right here, this is like different, we have 9 essential amino acids. Each color represents, those essential amino acids. So this eggs has 100% of those 9 essential amino acids. So that's why we use protein. We use egg as like a reference protein. And, when we don't have when this protein has a high quality protein, high biological value, we call this one as complete protein because it has all essential amino acids in amounts that are required by the humans, like fish, meat, poultry, cheese, eggs, milk, soy product. In the plant, only soy is the complete protein, is a high quality protein. The rest of them, like legumes, grains, nuts, they are not a complete protein because they don't have all of the essential amino acids, which is 9 essential amino acids. All right. Other, we just call them incomplete protein. They just have a lower quality proteins like plant food. Okay. And again, we talk about limiting amino acid. When you have one limiting amino acid, then you limit the synthesis of protein. Then we call this essential amino acid as a limiting amino acids. So protein quality, when you consume those low quality protein, actually can go through complementary like protein, combine the food with limiting amino acids to make more complete protein, like legume and grains you eat together, like beans and rice. So they all have a one deficient. For example, rice, they have a limiting protein, limit their lysine. For the legumes, they are missing the methionine, but when you complete them together, eat them together, they can complement each other, so you are not going to miss anything. You can, like vegetables, they are missing with the methionine. For the nuts, they are have a limiting amino acid, which is lysine. But when you eat them together, then you are not going to have any deficiency of those methionine and lysine. Let's look at the figure, how it look like a mutual supplementation. And this one, also in your part 3 supplementation, protein parts, you're going to see I ask you what is mutual supplementation. So for example, like eggs, they have those 9 essential amino acids. For the tortillas, they are missing one certain amino acid. For the rice, they are missing one thing, which is lysine. But when you eat tortilla with rice together, they can complement each other. Okay, so or like tortilla eat with pinto beans, rice with tofu. That's how they can complement each other to make them become a more complete proteins. Let me know if you have any other questions.